Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. As always, I am very honored to have you here in our today's video. All right, so what it is that I want to speak about, what I'm starting to notice more and more of is that there are people that are adopting a doom and gloom filter of what they think the future has in store. So I know that there's a lot of people that are well-intentioned. They're trying to point out where we are as a society, how disconnected we are, how much we've separated ourselves from nature, how much we have forgotten, our true self or our authentic self. But then there's a hint of the future is doomed. The future has a lot of negative things in store that we as a collective are not going to be able to survive through. And we're essentially going to be moving into a world that's just all bad. So I wanted to come here and I wanted to share some of my insights, some of my understandings of human nature, and actually bring something to the table that's very contrary to what a lot of people believe and what a lot of people are thinking right now. Because one thing that I know is that whenever there is the collective think, you could call it group think, that usually is not the truth. So whatever the majority of everyone kind of adopts as a collective archetype usually isn't what it actually is. There's always usually deeper layers and deeper layers and deeper layers. And if you get into those deeper layers, there's a lot of wonderful things there. There's a lot of beautiful things that you can discover. But it takes a commitment to yourself, takes a commitment to understanding the darker parts of yourself and really processing that energy, which most people seemingly aren't willing to do. And that's understandable. And there's no judgment or shame. But what I do want to say is, once again, I would believe if I, for example, took this camera, I walked outside to, let's say, South Beach, Miami, which is about 2 hours away from where I live. And I said, what's your thoughts on the future? What do you think is in store for the future of the United States and for maybe even the world at large? I would almost guarantee that probably 8 out of 10 people would say, oh, we're doomed. Oh, it's going to go to shit. Oh, it's all bad. Not so great things are going to happen. Could almost guarantee that. So, what is it that I truly feel about this? And what is it that I even know about this in regards to how evolution occurs within the human being that's living on a planet like Earth? Okay, well, first thing first, regardless, Earth is changing. There's no doubt about that. Earth has its own consciousness. It is literally its own living being, Earth itself. Just like we as human beings are our own consciousness with our own living beingness that's inhabiting this physical body, well, there's also other consciousness that lives inside of us. For example, your microbiome, parasites, fungus. These are all conscious entities and beings that are living inside of your physical body too, yet you are the source of this physical body. So when we look at Earth, we're basically the microbiome as the humans on the planet Earth. Okay? So with that being said, Earth is always going to do what Earth is going to do. Earth is going to evolve whether we adapt to it or not. Now, that when we really do zoom in on that concept there, that's a really good thing to know, because that means that there's going to be a stronger, always at all times, there's going to be a stronger gravitational pull towards authenticity, towards health, towards wellness, towards nature and things that are organic, because that's the consciousness of Earth itself. Now, yes, as humans, we can come in, and because we have free will, we can do things, we can try to force things, we can try to manipulate and control things, and that can cause a lot of catalyst, and it can create a lot of resistance for us as the human beings living on Earth. Yeah, that's a reality. We can potentially create wars. Wars can bring a lot of pain. They can bring a lot of suffering. They can bring a lot of death. But ultimately, Earth is still going to be doing what Earth is doing. And I am going to tell you this too. There are always going to be humans living on this planet that are going to be evolving with Earth too. So just because the collective, the group think, decides to want to manipulate and control and enter into all this war and, just basically projecting inner conflict because of unhealed trauma, doesn't mean that you have to subscribe to that way of living. You're not necessary, just because your country, just because where you live believes something or experiences something, doesn't mean that you have to experience it the same way that everyone else is. You can be your own person experiencing the world in a very different way than maybe the collective is experiencing it. I'll give you an example. For the collective consciousness during the pandemic, when that was a really tough time for a lot of people, struggled with their mental health, their emotional health. They struggled with, their relationships. They felt isolated. They literally were afraid for their lives. A lot of people were drinking tons of alcohol and they were smoking a lot of weed and just doing a bunch of substances. During this time, collectively, most people would say this was a really bad time. This was not good. Whereas for me, this was the time where I actually got to focus most of my time and energy because of the pandemic, because I filed for unemployment. I got to put my time and energy into my YouTube channel and take it seriously as if it was my new full-time job. And then for the first time, I was able to monetize my channel. And when I monetized, I never had to work again. So for me, during a time when the collective was really struggling and going through a really tough situation, I was able to use that as an opportunity to springboard myself into more of the life that I actually wanted to live. So it was actually very valuable for me. And I'm not the only person that experienced value during a really collectively rough time. So it's all about your relationship to your inner process and how you relate to the planet in regards to the Earth's evolution, but also how you relate to the collective consciousness, because you don't need to subscribe to that. You don't need to attach to that and then identify yourself with everybody else. Okay? So that's definitely a very important factor to know. But the next thing that I want to really go into is, once again, there's a lot of people that have this doom and gloom idea on what they think reality is going to be in the near future or even in the long-term future. And I personally don't believe this to be the case at all. I actually think there's going to be a lot more room for connection, a lot more room for unity, a lot more room for the authentic self to emerge. But I'm also not naive. I know it's going to come with contrast. I know in order for that to be a reality, there has to be some sort of a catalyst that also springboards us as a collective in that direction. But I am not a believer that we're moving into a future that's doomed, or that we're moving into a future where all of us are going to be controlled by robots. Basically, our psyches are going to be taken over because we're glued to our phones and our nervous systems will be all out of whack. We're all going to be dissociated and we're going to be basically dopamine junkies. I don't subscribe to that. I don't believe that at all. I definitely think people struggle with these different avenues of life itself. I think that's a reality, but I don't think the future we're moving into is doomed to a collective consciousness that is that way. Matter of fact, I would probably go as far as saying right now, with where we are in the collective on Earth, this is probably some of the worst it's going to be within the next couple hundred years. Like right where we are now. I think this is probably the hardest part because we're in this very ripe degree of a huge shift. I mean, once again, the planet is literally shifting its energy. The planet's moving into a different density. That's a pretty big deal, which means us as humans have to shift with the planet's density because we're a part of it. That's always the hardest part in someone's development, is when you're in the beginning of the death cycle and you're stepping into the unknown, because you haven't really started to tap into that new sense of self or that new sense of authenticity. You're just kind of like in this fog. You're in this mist that feels like, what's happening? I'm losing control. I don't feel good. My dopamine's not spiking anymore. The things that used to make me feel good aren't making me feel good anymore. That's because the nervous system's rewiring. So it's a really strange phase to be in. And this is something that we experience interpersonally in our own lives when we go through death and rebirth, but we're going through it collectively now. So it's always when you're going through this phase of the process, the beginning of the death cycle, where you're starting to really shift into the unknown, that's always the most uncomfortable phase of the process, every single time. When you get through that, and when you start to re-regulate your nervous system, you develop new neural networks that are the new familiar pathways of you being more of who you are. That's when you start to feel a little bit better, because your body will feel safer. Your nervous system will actually feel like it recognizes this energy. It will be able to recognize the energy around you in a sense of like feeling like you have some sense of understanding and knowingness of what's going on around you. And that provides a feeling to the body of safety, which feels good. But it's so normal and natural that you're not going to experience that until you go through it. Because a big part of going through the death process is you have to release the old nervous system. You have to release and unwire neural pathways and neural networks. You have to build new relationships with different parts of yourself that used to be different personality masks that you used to wear. You have to change physical relationships. You have to actually let people go and be more open to new relationships coming in. You have to change a lot of things, your eating habits, your coping mechanisms. That's the hardest part. And that takes time to surrender to that. That's where you get to reintegrate a lot of repressed emotions and energy that has been trapped inside of your body for so long. That is not comfortable. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like that's an easy process to go through, because I promise you it's not. Now imagine that happening collectively. That's where we are now. This is going to happen for the next couple 100 years. This is going to be the hardest time in our collective consciousness. But as we all eventually start to shift out of this, things are going to look very different. I promise you this, in a good way, in a healthy way, an integrated way. And I want to bring I want to add in another piece of awareness. It's a little bit cringe to watch because, there's a lot of influencers that are, on YouTube sort of perpetuating this doom and gloom reality that we're moving into in the future. And I'm not here to judge them or shame them. I can understand where they're coming from. But it's sad that this is something that they're promoting and they're influencing other people to think, because there's also a lot of absolutely amazing things that every single one of us has access to and is currently experiencing now. I mean, most of us have the safety of being able to live in your own home without anyone barging in and taking over and completely killing you and your whole family. Okay? We have the safety of being able to be vulnerable again. Like, we can actually be vulnerable. And for those of you that don't know what the real definition of vulnerable is, I encourage you to look it up, but it's basically the ability to open yourself up to attack and essentially trust that everything's going to be okay. We have the ability to practice being vulnerable again, which is an amazing asset. We have the ability to share how we feel. We have the ability to express things. We have a multitude of sources and resources of studying our psychology and start studying our nervous systems and our spirituality. I mean, look at the essence of YouTube. YouTube is something we have access to. That is such a beautiful thing. One second, I gotta let my cat inside. I can hear her. Come on, little one. Come on. Yes. Yes. Okay. What I was saying is we have access to things like YouTube. We have access to Instagram. We have access to Facebook. We have access to all these different ways that we can communicate with other people from all over the world. I mean, for me, I speak to a lot of you that are in this community that I've created. And there's so many of you that are literally from all over the world. Whereas if I didn't have the ability to make YouTube videos or have an Instagram or Facebook, I would have never been able to meet you. I would have never been able to communicate with you and get to know you on that deeper level. So these are all really cool things. I mean, even if you look at our financial system is set up in a way that if you do it right, you can compound your money and you can create real financial freedom, which is what so many of us want to experience. And it's actually not that complicated. I used to think for so long that it was really complicated to get rich or to get wealthy. And that's because I was trying to get rich to cover up deeper wounds. I thought that if I was rich, that would mean that I'm worthy again, or I'm worth being loved. And that was all wrong. And when I started healing that trauma and letting go of the need to be rich, then I naturally started becoming wealthy internally. And then that started translating into different financial opportunities, different financial doorways were able to open. This is because we're living in our today's time. This is the future compared to 500 years ago. 500 years ago, there was people getting murdered like it was there was people getting murdered like slapping a fly on a wall. There was, 500 years ago was essentially the medieval era. Okay. The medieval, even the word evil is inside of it. This was an era where survival stress was at its all-time high. There was no room for vulnerability. There was no room for just kind of chilling out and creating financial freedom. There was absolutely, of course, no social medias. There was none of that stuff. People have this idea, oh man, phones are destroying our lives. Social media is destroying us. 500 years ago, people were killing each other when they didn't like things or when things upset them. There was a ton of alcohol addiction, tons of alcohol abuse, and other types of substances too. A lot of us have forgot where we've come from and how better things actually are right now in the moment. And I'm not saying that things aren't challenging. I'm not saying that there aren't bad things right now. But what I am saying is that compared to just 500 years ago in the past, night and day difference. We are living a much better life than what we did 500 years ago. So think about 500 years from now into the future. Think about how much better it's then going to be. Just literally take a second to really process that. 500 years ago, the version of you that lived during that time, if there ever was living so that you could survive every day. You had to make your own food. You had to go get your own food. You had to hunt it. You had to appease to certain people that were higher up than you, or you could get hurt. Like, you have to understand that. There was diseases. There was all this stuff. There wasn't any real doctors. It was a kill or kill. It was a kill or be killed type of reality. Yeah, they didn't have phones. Yeah, there was more nature, I'm sure. There was more connection to nature in some sense. Yeah, there was, things that were different during that times, but that was a much more ruthless, scary time frame than it is what we're currently living in now. I 100% promise you this. So for people to think that right now we're at this point in life where everything's just headed in this direction of doom and gloom and that's what it has to be, that's not true. These are people that have forgot where we've actually come from in regards to our evolutionary process, and in some ways have been spoiled by modern time society and the different amenities and different technologies and gadgets that we do have, where, yeah, they're feeling a little bit depressed, they're feeling dissociated from their self, but they're projecting their own frustration onto the future and onto other people that they want to believe, or excuse me, onto other people that they want to convince that the future is also going to be bad, when in reality, it's not. And I 100% guarantee you it's not. There are going to be people that are people, as in you listening to this right now, there are many of you that are going to thrive the most you've ever thrived in your entire life, moving as we continue to move into the new world, because this is your frequency. This is your resonance. There are many of us here right now that have energetically prepared for the new world before the new world even became a reality. Think about that. You know how I said most of us as humans are evolving with the planet? There are some humans here that aren't even from Earth. And I know that this gets deep. This is where we get into kind of that occult side of things. But there are some humans here that are not from Earth and are from planets that are already existing in higher densities. And these humans carry an energetic resonance that's actually further evolved than Earth itself. And they're helping to initiate Earth into a new frequency, into a new density. So that's a very deep subject, but that's also another thing. And there's a lot of people that are wanting to, adapt and harmonize their energy to the changes that we're going through so that you don't have to go through such a excruciatingly, debilitatingly, painfully suffering process. Yes, there's always going to be pain that is a part of growth. There's no doubt about it, but it doesn't have to be so extreme. Okay, so those of you that are here now that are watching this type of content, you're preparing yourself before some of the major shifts that are actually happening on the planet, so that as those shifts take place, you're already attuned to it, you're already adapted to it, and you're just going to flow right into it. And that this new world that we're moving into is a world, a resonance that so many of us have already started to become the embodiment of, which means that is our reality. That's our thriving reality, because our resonance is probably resonating at a higher level than where the collective consciousness currently is now, and even potentially where the planet's consciousness is now. So when the planet shifts into that next density, there are those of us that are already in that state, and that becomes our time to live our most satisfying, fulfilling lives. And that's not to take away from where you are now. It's not to take away from the process. Every moment matters, and just being present is what matters the most. But I do want you to recognize that there is a future for you that is very satisfying and very fulfilling at a soul level. So don't fall into this idea that it has to be doom and gloom, because it's not. For some people, it's going to be doom and gloom, and I'll explain why. So a very natural thing that happens in the development process when you're working with protector parts of yourself. So these are the protective adaptations that we develop when we've went through trauma in the past. These protective adaptations literally become parts of ourself, like parts of our actual psyche, that in some ways can be essentially be like their own entity inside of our consciousness, because they exist in the physical body as essentially repressed emotions, and then they are in the subconscious, which stays in the subtle energy field. So the root of these parts is repressed energy when they're in these protective roles, at least. And then they sit in the subconscious. And then that means that they are actually intelligent beings that are in our subtle energy field. And these are parts of us. So, for those of you that have little voices that talk to you, like one voice might say, go do this. Another voice might say, go do that. That's what I'm referring to when I'm talking about parts of you, which every single one of us has. Okay. Some of us are more aware of them than others. Some of our parts are more extreme and more intensified than others. But every single one of us does have parts. So with that being said, parts, especially the protector ones, they like to manage things. They like to control situations. They like to make sure that we are protected from the emotional wounds that we're also carrying inside of our bodies. These are the other parts that are called the exile parts, the parts of us that carry the pain from whatever traumas that we've been through in the past. So it's our protectors that are protecting ourself from the exiles. That's how they operate. So it's very normal that when you're going through a transformation, a death and a rebirth, essentially what that really is you are separating from your attachment to certain protective parts of you, and you're coming back into your self energy. And naturally, while you're in self energy, you're creating room for your exiles to present themselves. And then it's time for your self energy to nurture and to be present with your exiles. But the protector parts, they can get quite aggravated and they can get very frustrated. And you can imagine, because they've been running in the ways that they've been managing and controlling for years. So they are a literal charged entity in your subtle field. They are a literal nervous system pathway and a network that operates in the way that it has been for probably the past 10 plus years. So that part of you that thinks it needs to protect you from the feelings of abandonment and betrayal, when you start to feel those feelings of abandonment and betrayal, like some fear and sadness, that protector part thinks that's dangerous. It thinks that's wrong. So it goes on alert. It goes beep, 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 beep. Protect, 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 manage, 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 control something, control something, control something, keep you distracted, keep you distracted. That's how the manager parts operate. That's how these protectors work. So in order for us to heal, we actually have to feel those feelings. We have to integrate those exiles. But if our protectors go in overdrive, then obviously you can see there's an inner conflict. That's going to be a little bit challenging. So we have to build new relationships with these parts of us. Okay? And I just want to say, these protector parts of us too, they're not bad. These are not evil parts of us that want to hurt us. As I said, they're just trying to keep us safe. It's just that they don't know how to do it, because when we were younger and we went through that trauma originally, they were just doing what they knew how to do that actually did help us survive certain things. But now that we're adults, they're still operating in that same role. And that same role as adults has now become toxic. So we have to reparent these protector parts of us and unwire them. Now, the reason why I bring all of this up when it comes to understanding your inner system here is because it's very normal when you're going through death and rebirth, separating from protectors, they can get a little bit aggravated. And the protector parts can go into a state of like what I guess I would refer to as overdrive. And for example, let's say I'm going through a really big ego death right now. And there's a part of me that I've been identified with for a long time. And I'm starting to realize that part of me is not getting me anywhere in life that I want to be. And I'm starting to realize that it's actually hurting me and it's not who I truly am. And it's costing me valuable time and energy to keep being that part. So then I naturally start dying from that attachment. I start separating from it and I start observing it for what it really is. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this is what I used to believe was true. And I used to believe that this was always real and that life had to be lived this exact way. So then as I'm starting to separate from that part, now I'm starting to feel some of the emotions from the exile. Then this part comes back online even stronger because once again, its response was to protect me from the core wounds of my exiles. So as I'm saying in this example, as I'm starting to let go from that attachment and then go into the exiles, it can stimulate the protector part. And the protector part can go on overdrive, and it can tell me things through a little voice in my head or through my body itself, because it has access to the nervous system. It can communicate to me that everything's bad, everything's wrong. If I go into this exile part of me, everything's gonna go to shit. All right, give me 1 second. Hannah, come on. There you go. All right, I just had to let Hannah out. But yeah, so as I'm saying, and I know that this is deep information that I'm sharing. This is like deep education when it comes to your inner system and how to understand it and even how to work with it. So I can understand that if you're new to this stuff here, don't feel like you have to fully understand what it is that I'm communicating. Maybe you can give yourself some time to really sit with it and maybe listen to it a couple times over so that you can actually process what I'm trying to communicate here. But what I am saying is very real, and it does have an influence on our process. So the reason why I've brought all of this up in regards to our parts and how they operate is because right now, collectively, since we are going through this significant death and rebirth process, right now, there's a lot of people and their protective manager parts are on overdrive. And they probably are not conscious of that. They're not aware of that because they've probably been identified with those parts of them. So these parts of them are going to be viewing the future from doom and gloom and everything's all bad. It's all going to shit. Everything's wrong. We're so disconnected, this and that. When in truth, that's not actually where we're headed. It's just those parts of these people that are trying to regain some sense of control of reality. And it's essentially the part's way of communicating, I'm afraid to let go. I'm afraid to die. So, for example, for me, because I have an awareness of my inner system and my different parts, there are parts of me, protectors, that feel the same way about the future. It's all bad. It's all doom and gloom. It's all going to be this. Because the subtlety of what that part is doing, it's trying to get me to reattach and to re-identify with it by giving me this false story of what the future has in store. Because if everything in the future is doom and gloom, then that means I have to protect myself by living in survival because it's all bad. And that's what this protective part wants me to do because it's afraid to let go. And it's just trying to help me. It just wants to keep me safe, but it's afraid to let go and it wants me to re-identify with it. But at a soul level, at a self-energy level, I know at my core, the future is not doom and gloom. I know that there's amazing, wonderful, beautiful things that are in store. And I also know that this part of me needs to heal and it needs to build a new sense of trust for me and my self-energy that everything's going to be okay. And in my personal system, I have that trust. That's why I'm able to sit here now and talk about the future in this different type of way than how most people are perceiving it and understanding it. But not everybody has developed that relationship with their own protector parts and their own system to be able to see the truth of what's in store for the collective. Okay? So once again, yes, this is nuanced stuff, but just know during these uncomfortable phases of growth, your protector parts get more aggravated. They get more stimulated, which means you need to spend more time understanding them. You need to spend more time listening to them. You need to spend more time appreciating the work that they put in to try to keep you safe. You need to have love for them, but then you also need to spend time reparenting them and in some ways negotiating different roles that they can take in your system, or even negotiating them being willing to trust you to be in your self energy and to visit some of your exiled parts. This is a whole healing process that takes time, and you have to be patient with it, and you also have to be consistent with it. But if you really are doing the work, you can make huge progress, and then your protector parts, like myself, are not going to be overstimulated, and they're not going to be over aggravated and feeding me this belief or this idea that everything is going to go to shit and everything's all bad and this and that and this and that, because these protective parts of us can feed us a whole bunch of nonsense and a whole bunch of stuff that's just not true in order to get us to reattach to them and re-identify with them. And then that's what they think is security or they think is safe, but it's not. It's a false safety because it's all based on needing to control and needing to manage and needing to manipulate. Okay? So this is the essence of everything that I think you at this point in time need to know the most about the world that we are truly moving into. And I think one of the biggest takeaways is, remember, you get to decide what world you're moving into. You don't have to be like the collective think. You don't have to be like the group. You don't have to go right when everyone else is going right. You can go left, and you can choose to trust your intuition and your instincts and step into a world that actually has a lot of beauty, has a lot of connection, has a lot of fresh air and nature and love. And that's completely up to you. Okay, so if you're someone that's currently going through your process and you're wanting to really adapt to the changes that are taking place on our planet now, and you're wanting to really get ahead of the curve here with your healing and working through your trauma and connecting to your inner child and then grounding more into your self energy again, I have a pathway that I have for you. It is the first link below in the description. That's my Patreon. On my Patreon, I have a trauma course that takes you from start to finish, video by video. You just literally follow it in a start to finish fashion. That is everything that I have personally used when it comes to education, foundation, practice. And these are the primary things: education, foundation, and practice. All of these things that, as I said, I've used in my own life to heal my deeper traumas. And of course, healing is an ongoing process, but I've healed enough of my trauma to get back in touch with my self energy using this education, these principles, and this practice. So I want to create a path for you. If that's something that you're looking for right now and you feel called to this, here is your opportunity. As I said, first link below, there's the path. Now at the third tier in the Patreon, this is very unique and this is for a specific type of person. This is called the Universe B Healing Ritual. This is a real science of remote energy transfer that I lead on the 29th of every month that's designed to surface trapped trauma inside of your body, to bring it up to the forefront of your conscious awareness so that you can actually start reintegrating it, feeling through it, processing it, and then ultimately releasing it from the system so that it's no longer trapped there anymore. Because the more that energy is trapped, the more it actually builds up in its negative charge, and then it seeps through your life in a whole bunch of ways that are not comfortable. So it's best for us to find healthy ways to be able to bring this energy up and actually work with it, but it requires education and it requires commitment. So this is not for everybody. This is for those of you that are more committed to your process and are looking for that deeper form of healing. And if that is you, this can be an amazing catalyst to help you ground more into your self energy. That's going to help you better regulate your nervous system. That is going to change your resonance. And over time, your entire life can change for the better. And there are tons of people that are participating in this on a monthly basis, including myself. Every single month I lead this ritual. I go through the changes myself. And I promise you, then it's always the night of, and the next day I have a huge emotional release every time I do the ritual. And it's something that I've been able to document. I've been able to basically experiment on myself with. It is a very powerful thing. So once again, if that's something you resonate with and you want to join a collective of people that go through this every single month, I would be honored to have you there. First link below, that is tier number 3. Okay. Now at the second link below, this is where you can book a one-on-one call with me, or you can jump into mentorships. This is the most intimate way and powerful way to personally work with me. And we can go really deep into creating a foundation, regulating your nervous system, healing trauma, working with all of your different parts, all of the stuff that really matters the most that can absolutely change your life for the better. I would be honored to be able to support you through this deeper process if this is something that you're looking for. So that's second link below. Then the final link is the YouTube memberships. As you become a YouTube member, you're getting special recognition when I'm doing things like live streams. And that's pretty much it. You get other stuff too, but that's the primary thing. And I would love to have you there. Okay. So with that being said, we're going to wrap it up here. I hope you all have an amazing rest of the day or night, wherever you are. And I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.